Hello everyone, my name is Nazorius, and welcome to the High Rank Guide to the Switch Axe. Small disclaimer, this video is meant for hunters who have already made it to high rank and are familiar with the game. I'll be explaining mechanics more in depth than I would for a beginner's guide, so keep that in mind. The Switch Axe is a weapon with two modes: Axe mode, which has good mobility and high reach, and Sword mode, which has less mobility but attacks faster and harder than Axe mode. All attacks in Sword mode also don't bounce, no matter what part they hit. Very useful if you end up hitting hard parts. This weapon also lacks any defensive moves. There are no counters or blocking with this weapon, making it quite easy to cart if you aren't careful. Luckily in Rise, the Switch Axe gains some Silkbind attacks that help make not taking damage a bit easier, which will be covered a little later. Weapon Basics. At the top left of your HUD is the switch gauge. The bar in the middle powers your sword attacks and goes down with every attack you make in Sword mode. If the bar goes below this marker here, if you switch back to Axe mode, the icon will change into this. If you then try and morph into Sword mode, this will happen. You cannot move or take action during this animation, so try to avoid doing this at all costs. The switch gauge will increase slowly over time, and also increase a little bit when you perform morph attacks into Axe mode. However, if you're running very low, there's a switch skill that takes care of that. More on that later. You'll notice that when you hit with your sword, this outline will start to grow around the switch gauge. Once this surrounds the icon, it will glow. This is called amped mode, or amped state, and will apply file explosions to all attacks you make. Speaking of files, all Switch Axes have a file type. They are Power, Element, Exhaust, Dragon, Poison, and Paralysis. Every file type except for Power charges your amp meter quite quickly, and they are generally easier to use effectively. Power file charges the slowest, but if you can maintain an amped state for a large portion of the hunt, in many cases this will do more damage than the other types. File types will only apply to the attacks you make in Sword mode, and you don't have to be amped for them to work. The file explosion effect you get while amped does not add file effects to your axe attacks. If your weapon does status damage normally, the explosion will contribute to the status buildup, if it procs, seen here as a cloud effect. Otherwise, the explosion only does damage based off of your raw and elemental attack. Now that the basic mechanics are out of the way, let's talk about the switch skills. In your first slot, you have the option of the forward slash or the forward overhead slash. Both are performed by holding forward, that's forward in relation to your character in game, not the camera, and hitting X. Pick the forward overhead slash. The sooner you get used to using this move, the better. It does a lot of damage for a single hit, has great forward reach, so it's great for re-engaging, and can morph into your most damaging combo. I cannot find a single example where it would be better to use forward slash, which is unfortunate. What isn't unfortunate is that the next two switch skills are all usable to one degree or another. The second switch skill is either Element Discharge or Compressed Finishing Discharge. Both are performed in Sword mode by hitting X plus A together, then hitting X. If you are using Element Discharge, you'll then hit X repeatedly to finish this move, while Compressed Finishing Discharge, or CFD, only needs the single button press. Element Discharge does crazy damage, and can be cancelled early by pulling back and hitting X, or by simply stopping the X spam. This move also contributes to your amp meter, and can be used as a combo ender to get that last bit of amp. Now, once you are in amped mode, and you use Element Discharge, the move transforms into zero-sum discharge, and you will attach to the monster. Mash X to deliver sweet damage up close and personal that ends in a devastating explosion that sends you flying away from the monster and harm, hopefully. While attached to the monster, you can't get knocked off unless the monster is leaving the area or it's Kushala Dawara, cause he definitely needs it. This move by itself can be a little clunky, and it doesn't really flow out of every move. However, if it is used after any attack that makes your sword swing more than once, it looks like this. That's a lot nicer, and should mostly be how you go into this move. Another thing to note is that the initial thrust counts as a generic sword attack, meaning it uses some of the switch gauge. It also means that it will contribute to your amp meter. The move hits 3 times before going into the element discharge animation, so if you are very close to being fully amped, you can use this, and it should automatically transform into a zero-sum discharge, assuming you achieve full amp meter. Downsides to this move are the long animation commitment and the sharpness loss, as each tick of damage counts as a hit. While attached to the monster, you will also take damage if the part you grabbed onto becomes part of an attack, so it's best to use this while the monster is down, or just getting up. Compressed Finishing Discharge does less damage than its counterpart, but is faster and doesn't need sharpness nearly as fast. While you are winding up for the explosion animation, you also have what people call super armor. In this state, you are unable to be knocked out of your animation, and the damage you take is reduced. You can still be stunned, however, so try not to take too many hits too quickly. This move also has the benefit of charging your amp meter very quickly, making it synergize with power files quite nicely. The major downside of this move is that if you use it near teammates, they'll be sent flying. Not a really good choice for multiplayer, unfortunately. The last switch skill belongs to the Invincible Gambit and the Soaring Wyvern Blade. This is one of the 2 Silkbind attacks you have, and the only one you can change. Both are activated by pressing ZL plus X. Invincible Gambit is the skill you start with, and sends your hunter forward while doing 3 axe attacks in a row. This does good damage along with putting your hunter into the super armor state, for as long as those wires are around you. You also gain full earplugs during this move, making Invincible Gambit an excellent mobility option and a get-out-of-jail-free card if you find yourself cornered, as well as a good way to ignore monster roars. However, much like the CFD armor, you can get stunned out of this, so use carefully. Soaring Wyvern Blade sends your hunter into the air, and pressing X at any time while airborne will send you rocketing towards the ground with your sword extended. Upon hitting a monster with this attack, a cloud of energy will be where you struck, detonating a second later. Very flashy and very cool. This does do less damage than hitting all 3 hits of an Invincible Gambit, but it's generally more reliable. Use this move to dodge sweeping attacks, or to re-engage. It also charges your amp meter a good amount, which is always a good thing. Probably the biggest reason people use this move, however, is the fact that after an end explosion of zero-sum discharge, at any point while you are still airborne from the explosion, you can use this move to avoid the long ending animation from landing normally, and to look super cool and deal damage, obviously. This move's ending animation can be cancelled by either attacking, or hitting ZR to morph slash. While it's not a switch skill, the other Silkbind move you have is called the Switch Charger, and sends your hunter forward a short distance, or whichever direction you input, while filling your switch gauge. You'll notice the bar begin to flash for a short time, and during that time, no attack will drain it. Perfect for spamming your discharge moves. This move also has a brief window, where you are invincible right at the beginning. It is a very small window, but seems to be slightly bigger than your standard roll, so if you practice, you can use this move to dodge attacks, or roars. Mobility. After each attack you make in sword or axe mode, you can hit B and hold left or right to do a short hop. In sword mode, you are also able to hop forward and backward. This does have some iframes, but isn't super reliable. It's mainly used to reposition if the monster shifts, or if you get bumped out of position. Generally, if you need to get out of the way, you need to get used to dodging twice, like this. Another thing to know is morph attacks actually send you forward a bit, especially out of sword mode. This is extremely useful, and often the only way you can get to safety fast enough. Combos. Most of the combos you'll be using with the Switch Axe require Rapid Morph 3. Not only will this increase your damage, but it will make using the Morph Slash evades easier and more effective. Axe moves and combos. Pressing X plus A in Axe mode will perform the Rising Slash. This is a very high-reaching move, and can be useful for hitting hard-to-reach parts of the monster, like the tail. You can then press X after this to do the Overhead Slash. This combo will loop indefinitely if you want, but you'll usually only get a couple hits before you need to reposition or dodge. Pressing X in Axe mode will perform the Overhead Slash by itself. This is a good opener if the monster is down and has good reach, but generally you won't be using this one as much since the forward Overhead Slash does more damage. Hitting X 3 times in succession does this combo. Don't use it. Don't! It's terrible. In my hundreds of hours using the Switch Axe, I have never used this combo on purpose. It's stinky garbage. Don't use it. It's poo-poo. Pressing A will begin the Wild Swing attack, and subsequent presses will continue the attack. This is the only move that actively uses stamina, so keep an eye out. You are able to dodge at any point during this move, so it's pretty safe to use and racks up damage quickly. After swinging your axe at least 3 times, hit the X button to do the Heavy Slam. This move does a lot of damage and is a good combo ender, however it has a long animation so it's not great to use unless you have a large window. Heavy Slam will also put your weapon into a primed charging state, which adds 2 arrows next to your gauge. All attacks that normally charge your amp meter will do so faster, and the outline will appear orange. Usually not needed for most files, but it's great if you're using power. It should be noted that the Heavy Slam doesn't need to connect to prime your weapon. As long as you hit X, you should see the double arrow appear. You can also hit ZR during Wild Swing to go into the Wide Sweep attack, and a subsequent press of ZR will morph you into Sword mode. This move used to be very good in World, but doesn't really have a use in Rise. I only really use this move by accident. At any point during an axe attack, you can pull back and hit A to do a Fade Slash. This is a great option to do damage and get away from an attack, but it usually has to be done before you see the monster start to telegraph. Otherwise, you'll get hit. Sword combos. Pressing A after a left rising slash, or the morph rising double slash, will perform the triple slash. This is new to Rise and does some good damage. Pressing A after this, or after a standard double slash, will do the Heavenward Flurry. You will very rarely use this move because of its animation commitment, but it fills your amp meter more than any other move in your arsenal. This is very useful if you're using power files. In previous Monster Hunter games, you tended to do damage mostly in sword mode, so more sword combos were nice to know. In Rise, and more specifically with the addition of the skill Rapid Morph, sword-only combos like XXXA are a thing of the past. That being said, this combo, while primed, will fill an amp meter all the way if you're using a power file, and is the only one I would use in normal play. You will most likely move on from this combo, but is a good way to reliably charge without thinking too much. Rapid Morph combos. The skill Rapid Morph gives all morph attacks a speed and damage boost. For example, this is the same move with no levels in Rapid Morph, all the way up to level 3. The combo you'll use most often is ZR, A, ZR. This can loop forever, and is the best option for when the monster is down. Assuming the monster is stunned, you have about 10 seconds to do damage before it gets up. This gives you plenty of time to do the combo twice before ending with an Elemental Discharge or CFD. This combo takes advantage of the Morph Double Slash, which is the most damaging morph attack you can do. You can get to the Morph Double Slash and the Morph Rising Double Slash by pressing ZR after a Double Slash, or any Overhead Slash, respectively. This makes opening the ZR combo with the forward Overhead Slash a very nice option. Although if you're right next to the monster, it's better to just use the combo as is. One last thing to know, is that after any sword attack, you can press ZR and pull back on the left analog stick to do a downward fade slash, which works similarly to the normal fade slash, just with less distance traveled. And that's it! If I left out or forgot to mention any moves, that's because they never really see any use, so they are honestly not worth taking up brainpower. Armor skills. The only skill that is absolutely required is Rapid Morph 3. Evade Extender is another very good skill on Switch Axe because of its short evade distance. I always use at least 1 point, but you can use 2 comfortably. I wouldn't recommend 3 points, because then it becomes very difficult to position yourself with accuracy. Power Prolonger is very useful for power files. Level 3 doubles the amount of time that you're amped, which is amazing due to power files taking longer to charge. If you're going to use power files, I would prioritize getting at least level 2 for this reason. For the other file types, this is more of a comfort skill because they charge so fast, so you can skip this one if you don't have the room. Any sharpness mitigation skill is extremely valuable on the Switch Axe. Razor Sharp 3 is a very comfortable skill to use. Protective Polish is a bit harder to maintain, but will give you more damage in the long run. You only need 2 levels for this to be worth it, although 3 is much nicer. Master's Touch level 3 is only good if you can get about 100% affinity, as it only works 80% of the time anyway, and only on critical hits. Moving on from sharpness, focus is actually worthless for the Switch Axe, as it only speeds up the power file charge by a small amount. Skip this skill. Other than that, you should experiment with the different skills and build what you think is fun. Quick note about weapons. Most of the Switch Axes you'll come across can be useful in one way or another, so experiment. Or just look at example builds online if that's how you like to play. Luckily, there isn't a wrong way to enjoy the game, so go crazy. Something worth mentioning though, is that if the monster is weak to an element, a Switch Axe with elemental damage on it will generally outdamage one that focuses just on raw damage, so keep that in mind. The Switch Axe is a versatile weapon, with a lot of tricks up its sleeve. The hardest part of using this weapon is knowing what attacks to use and when, but like anything else, that comes with practice. The Switch Axe is by far my favorite weapon, and the one I have the most fun with. Hopefully by watching this video, you can come to appreciate this wonderful weapon too. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you next time.